My name's Nick Pankhurst and I'm one of the trench supervisors for the Silchester Bathhouse project, and I'm going to talk to you about case study 2, which is Trench 4, which we opened in our 2019 season of excavations. Now we're looking here at an aerial view of the bathhouse. This is showing all of the trenches that we excavated in 2018, 2019. Trench 1 is at the top of the slide, trenches 2 and 3 are on the right hand side of the slide, and trench 4 is on the left hand side or on the western side of the bath complex. Looking at more detail in the Edwardian plan, the reason why we excavated this trench was because it would have given us a full transect pretty much across the entire bath complex with trench 2 that we excavated in 2018. And it's a fairly complicated area of sort of structure. There's lots of wall relationships, and it would give us an opportunity to sort of test the Edwardian phasing, the Edwardian plan chronology really. Looking at more detail at that Edwardian plan, you can see the various colours, the greens, the blues, the kind of blacks and shaded areas, and this is their phasing. This is their kind of structural phasing, what they saw from earliest to latest. And we know from the 2018 excavations that this wasn't always necessarily right. They didn't normally get this spot on, so there's an opportunity for us to kind of test that. And then also in opening up an area on the west of the bathhouse, or the exterior, we're trying to target some of the potentially undisturbed deposits. We try and get some sort of sense of the chronology, because the Edwardians didn't really manage to do this at all. They didn't date any of the structural sequence at all, so that was what we were trying to achieve. Now this area was interpreted by the Edwardians as a tepidarium, or the warm rooms, and you can see the kind of hypercourse pili that they planned. So probably quite likely that this was some sort of area which was heated, and possibly the warm rooms themselves. And to give you a sense of what we found, I'm going to use the photogrammetry model that we generated, that Sarah Lambert-Gates generated, by taking drone photos and individual photos on the ground and stitching them all together to make a really quite sort of good photogrammetric model. And you can see trench 4 in this image is basically divided, the structure anyway is divided up into pretty much two spaces. There's a larger space on the left hand side and a smaller space on the right hand side, broadly speaking earlier on the left and later on the right. So to start the model off, starting with the kind of left hand side, the potentially earlier area of structure, you can see these hypercourse pili, the stacks which are on the floor here, the tiles, stacks of tiles which would have supported the hypercourse, which would have been for heating the floors. The floor surfaces have gone obviously, but this would have been supported heating the floors which were supported above this foundation level. Spinning the model round, you can see that the photogrammetry gives us a really good opportunity to kind of investigate some of the details, some of the fine details of the structure that we don't necessarily pick up that well with our traditional recording. It allows us to revisit the structure in its entirety as well. So you can see in these walls there's a great deal of complexity to the actual structure. The Edwardians didn't necessarily pick up on this. And we've got elements such as to the north of our excavated area, we just picked up little bits of things like the plunge pool surfaces, these tiles here, so part of the cold baths, the plunge pool itself, and then spinning around on the southern edge of the trench, just disappearing into the bulk, we can see this curved wall which is part of the area that the Edwardians interpreted as the hot rooms, the caldaria, something that we were hoping to investigate this season. Other little elements, kind of interesting sort of elements of this tile and green sand and flint platform, we don't really know what this is for, but it could have been built to support some sort of cistern or maybe even a statue. So the little platforms in the centre of the slide there. And moving over to the western area of trench 4, we have this kind of later additions, which you can see more clearly the pili stacks at the base of the floor here. The Edwardians clearly knocked these about quite a bit because they don't quite show up as they did in their photos. But also in the middle we have these kind of sort of L-shaped structures which look to be part of the stoke hole, so a fairly late stoke hole, so where they would have actually heated the fire, created the fire and stoked it from, to actually heat the hypercore structures, to heat the spaces above. In this instance, possibly some sort of pool, or hot pool. We're not entirely sure. Other little details that we picked up on, so you can see that there's these kind of squarish projections on the exterior of these walls at the western end, and where we look at the wall here in profile, you can see that it dips down to the right, so there is subsidence and buttressing. So they made an attempt to actually consolidate these walls in a later date, and these probably slumping into earlier features, maybe pits, wells or ditches, possibly even part of the Iron Age sequence. So moving on to what this really told us. So reopening up the trenches, what did we establish? We wanted to have a look to see whether we could build on the Edwardian phasing, and we really could do that. We showed that they had simplified this a lot. So what I'll take you through is a kind of simplified phasing, starting with these orange lines, this orange highlighting shows you that there's an early phase of demolished walls that the Edwardians kind of picked up on, but they didn't really see it as an early phase. We did. And on top of this, later than the orange phase, you have this green phase where everything moves out towards the west, everything gets a bit later, and you have here the first sort of definitively heated spaces with the stoke hole on the left hand side there, so stoking from the west hand side, west to kind of heat the space, big space on the east there. Later still we have additions where they build this kind of U-shape staple sort of shapes structure out to the west, further west still, and within this there's better surviving pili stacks, and then another little stoke hole in the southern wall of this, so showing that there's kind of complexity, and they move around the kind of heating, the stoking of these structures quite a lot over time. Latest in the sequence we found marked out in these red lines is possibly some little standalone structure, maybe a little kind of building which was stoked from the eastern side there, the big L-shaped structures. This possibly may have kind of survived after the rest of the bathhouse had gone into disuse, really, or elements of it had gone into disuse. So maybe a little kind of standalone heated structure very late in the sequence. And it's possible that our little platform, or quite big platform, goes along with this. It may have been contemporary. Again, pretty hard to say. So what did we find out to the west? We targeted this area hoping to find unexcavated, disturbed deposits, and we did. And what we found at the top of the sequence here, or truncated by Edwardian excavations, Edwardian trenches, was a series of rubble deposits, so flint and tile spreads, which you'd expect sort of demolition. But within this, highlighted in the red, we found areas where we actually had bits of pitched sort of tile and flint, individually coursed tile and flint. So it looked very much as if this was elements of the collapsed walling, upper walling of the bathhouse, the western bathhouse wall, which is quite interesting because it gives us kind of insight into the structure above the foundation level that we have elsewhere, because the rest of the structures that we've got within Trench 4 and indeed within the entire bathhouse sequence are just at foundation level. So it gives a little glimpse into kind of how potentially the upper walling would have looked. Below this, on the west, we also found two parallel ditches. Probably the one on the left hand side is slightly later than the one on the right hand side here. And at the base of the left hand side ditch we found a truncated wooden stake surviving right at the bottom. Now, looking back at the Edwardian plan, the Edwardians actually found what they interpreted as a wooden causeway, so highlighted in pink here, a whole series of wooden stakes and a wooden sort of platform which extended out to the north, and they interpret this again, as it says, as a wooden causeway. But what it seems quite likely is that these stakes actually sit within what you could project as the left-hand ditch line, that this is more than likely part of the drainage sequence, or even more likely the leat, the kind of water channel bringing water into the western side of the baths down this ditch line. Possibly once the ditch itself has kind of silted up, they actually put in this kind of wooden structure as the ground level rises, similar to some of the things that we found in the western side of the trench in the 2018 season in Trench 1. So basically, to summarise, what have we found, and was it worthwhile reopening this trench up? And I think say it definitely is, because what we found is very similar to what the Edwardians found, but we did actually manage to build up a much better kind of sense of the actual structural sequence, the chronology of the structure from the earliest to the latest. But in sinking some sort of test pits into the flooring and also excavating out these areas to the west, we managed to build up some sense of the chronology, the dating. This is something that the Edwardians never really managed to establish. And through our post-ex, through looking at the pottery dates, the coin dates from these deposits out to the west, and some of the test pits we put in beneath the structures, we should, fingers crossed, be able to actually build up a better sense of the actual date of the bathhouse sequence itself. Thanks a lot.